Hello and welcome to this special show on Rajya Sabha Television. I am Vishal Dahiya, and here we take a stock of India's fight against COVID-19. Now, one of the very important aspects in this battle against this particular pandemic is the race to find a vaccine against COVID-19. And while almost everyone, all researchers and scientists across the globe are working overtime to try and find this particular vaccine, there are several vaccine candidates on which work is ongoing across the globe. In India, too, there are a number of vaccine candidates on which the work is going on right now. In fact, there are 3 vaccine candidates which are, as of now, in the second phase of human clinical trials, and we might get to know some positive results very soon. So we'll try and understand this very important aspect about indigenous development of COVID-19 vaccine. How has the work been going on? What's the kind of collaboration which is there between public funded organizations as well as private industry, and what are the norms and regulations there as well? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Dr. Aparna Mukherjee. We have with us THSTI, Clinical Trial and Health Systems Research Unit in ICMR. We're also joined by Urvashi Prasad, the Public Policy Specialist at Niti Aayog, and Dr. Gagandeep Kang, former Executive Director of THSTI and Professor of Microbiology at Christian Medical College, CMC. Welcome all of you to Rajya Sabha Television, and let me begin with you, Dr. Aparna. Since you're part of ICMR's clinical trial unit, what exactly is the status as far as indigenous vaccine candidates are concerned right now? How many, in which stages?
Right. So as I was saying, about indigenous vaccines, they are overall, there are 3 vaccines which are in clinical trial right now. So in India. So out of that, 2 of them are indigenous. So Bharat Biotech, which has collaborated with ICMR. So this was the seed vaccine, was the seed virus was isolated by the maximum containment facility at National Institute of Virology, led by Dr. Priya Abraham and her team, Dr. Pragya Yadav and Dr. Gajanan and their very able team. So then there was a technology transfer with Bharat Biotech, and so now this is moved forward. This is an inactivated virus, which right now would require 2 doses, and it is in phase 2. So as we know that there are some phases of trials. So if you start with phase 1, which is a smaller study, but then that takes into account mainly the safety of what we are studying, the investigational drug that we are studying. So then we go to phase 2, which would also take into account safety, but here our main focus would be that whether the vaccine or the drug is actually working or not at the doses that we think it will work. And then if these are successful, then we go forward to a phase 3 trial, which is obviously a bigger one, to see actually everything, starting from efficacy, safety, how it works. So, and we compare it with a random control to see that, yes, what we have seen is actually true and not by chance. So, okay. And even after a vaccine is actually marketed, there are still surveillance going on, because some of the side effects, some of the adverse events, some of the effects may not be visible immediately. It may be long term. So surveillance is always carried out even after vaccination. So right now we are at phase 2 for the indigenous vaccine. So if it's successful, we will definitely go forward.
Okay. So this is about the ICMR Bharat Biotech vaccine. But apart from that, other vaccine candidates on which the work is ongoing indigenously there, Dr. Aparna?
Yeah, but there are other vaccine candidates, but then this is the one that has proceeded furthest.
Okay. Dr. Gagandeep Kang, your views on the indigenous vaccine candidates. How far have we gone as far as development of a vaccine is concerned? And if you look at timeline as well, obviously that's an important aspect. But much more important than that is the very fact that we are able to do it indigenously.
I think a lot depends on what you call indigenous. Because if you look at the vaccine that is being made by Serum Institute, which is in phase 2b/3 studies, which is the AstraZeneca product, originally made by the University of Oxford. That is technology transferred to India. If you look at Covaxin, that is certainly an indigenous product because it is an inactivated vaccine, and inactivation of viruses is very old technology. We've had it since the 1960s. If you look at new technologies, the vaccine that is being developed by Zydus Cadila, which is also in clinical trials, is newer technology. It is a DNA vaccine. But again, this technology was not developed by Zydus Cadila in India. It was imported from overseas. There are other indigenous candidates being developed, including from the Indian Institute of Science, where there's a company called Minvax that is working on a receptor-binding domain antigen, which is just a protein vaccine. In addition, multiple other companies in India, Genova in Pune is looking at an RNA vaccine. Indian Immunologicals is looking at another inactivated candidate as well as a codon B optimized vaccine. Biological E is looking to work with multinationals as well as developing their own vaccine candidates. So there really is a lot going on with many different platforms being made in India.
Okay. That obviously is quite a lot of numbers in terms of vaccine candidates out there. Obviously, some of them are technology transfer. But Dr. Gagandeep, Kang, before I go to Urvashi, since you're here, if you could explain to our viewers in terms of of various vaccine candidates being worked upon, because as you yourself said, one of them is an mRNA vaccine, another is protein-based. A few of them are like inactivated virus candidates. So, what exactly is the difference here? What are we talking about?
All vaccines have the same goal, which is once you vaccinate individuals, you want them to be protected against disease and, if at all possible, protected against infection as well. So if you can protect against disease, then obviously you will not have people getting sick and going to hospitals. If you can protect against infection, then you will be preventing transmission of the virus. So you solve not only the individual problem, you also solve the public health problem. Now, where the candidates are concerned, we don't know which ones will work and how well they will work. The goal, at least initially, is to get a vaccine candidate that will protect in at least 50% of people against symptomatic disease. That means you must test positive for the virus, plus you must have some symptoms or the other.
Okay.
So if you get at least 50% protection from that, the first wave of vaccines will be considered successful by the regulators. The platform doesn't really matter. Where the platforms will matter is in our ability to scale. Which vaccines can we make hundreds of millions of doses or billions of doses instead of tens of millions of doses? The new technologies such as RNA and DNA, we will be able to make only a more limited supply, whereas with the older technologies, it may be possible for us to scale up to the hundreds of millions or 500 million doses a year.
Okay, that's quite interesting to note. Urvashi, I'd like to bring you in here on the ecosystem aspect here and the policies as well, both from the regulators' perspective as well as the policies which make it possible for the private industry and the public institutions like ICMR to go hand in hand with each other, because these are very crucial times. So what is different? What has made it possible? Obviously, the speed at which work has been going on is commendable, but there must be some reason why this ecosystem is working at this speed.
Yes, so I think, a couple of things have perhaps been a little different or, prioritized given just the urgency of the situation. One is that, a lot of different stakeholders, departments within the government, as well as outside, have actually come together. A lot of different research groups, which might have otherwise, work more independently, perhaps. There's been a clear understanding that, in this situation, collaboration is really the way forward, both within the government, because it's not just, about health or, about health research. It's much broader than that. So I think that understanding is something that we've seen coming to the fore in this context. Use of technology, of course, to address whatever barriers can be addressed. It's interesting you spoke about speed, and I think a lot of people are also very concerned that are we, just fast tracking the scientific process, so are we going to end up with a vaccine which isn't really proven in terms of safety and efficacy, and we're just in a rush to get the vaccine out. Now, of course, I would like to say that that's obviously not the intent. What we have been trying to fast track is the sort of the normal procedural things that hold things like that back in a normal context. So that's what we're trying to fast track. Obviously, the efficacy, the safety needs to be proven unequivocally for something like this. But we are certainly trying to fast track the sort of procedural, administrative, other kinds of delays that you might normally see when you're trying to develop, something like this. So that's really where I think the focus has been. And I think, of course, the indigenous candidates, there is, a huge focus, and it would be wonderful to see one or even more of them come through. And there could obviously be huge cost advantages as well in that context. But really, the idea is that wherever a vaccine does become available, we also gear up our manufacturing and distribution. So a lot of effort is also going in that direction, that we should be able to manufacture the doses that we would need, and also ultimately be able to distribute them. And I think there we are trying to learn a lot of lessons from our polio program, more recently from the mission Indradhanush, to see how can we gear up the system holistically, end to end.
Okay. Since you brought out two very important aspects, that is safety and efficacy, vis-a-vis the speed at which the work is ongoing on various vaccine candidates, let me bring in both Dr. Aparna and Dr. Kang. Let me start with you, Dr. Aparna. In terms of the vaccine on which ICMR is working along with Bharat Biotech, what are the results saying from the first phase of clinical trials, and ensuring the safety and efficacy as well, while also fast tracking the process? Is that an impediment here?
No, we wouldn't call it an impediment. In situations like this, we would require the speed, the fast tracking, but definitely not at the cost of actually proving that it is efficacious and it is safe. Like as my dear co-panelist said, that it is more of cutting the procedural delays that are usually there, so that things go more smoother and things are faster. And also, usually these trials are like in sequential manner, so that one phase goes in and you have the results, and then you plan for a second one and then a third one. But here, everything is being planned more in a parallel fashion, so that by the time one phase is being over, you already have the planning for the next phase. That's how we are trying to fast track it.
Okay. Dr. Kang? On the safety and efficacy part of developing a vaccine candidate, that's really important.
It is, and everyone globally is looking at how we can cut the time to a vaccine. The regulators have been very careful about this in making sure that any steps in vaccine development that are required are undertaken, though they may be taken up in parallel instead of sequentially, as is usually done in vaccine development. So nothing is being eliminated or reduced in any shape or form. Safety is paramount, and we will measure efficacy.
Okay. So there is obviously not a choice between the safety and efficacy and getting it done soon. One more aspect here, Dr. Kang, since earlier you're talking about different kind of vaccine candidates on which the work is ongoing. If you could explain to our viewers this aspect also in terms of a one-shot vaccine or a multiple-shot vaccine, does that also have to do with different platforms or different candidates on which the work is going on? Perhaps maybe a protein-based vaccine or an mRNA vaccine could end up a one-shot vaccine. Will that, or does that increase the efficiency as well?
What you're looking for, as I said, as an efficacy endpoint is at least 50% prevention of disease. Now, whether you get it with 1 or 2 shots does matter depending on the platform. So if you have a live vaccine, you're more likely to be able to get away with needing to use it only once. Whereas if you have a vaccine that is inactivated or only consists of components of the virus, you might need to use more than 1 dose. Nobody is going currently beyond 2 doses. And we will be figuring out whether if we can use additional substances like adjuvants, which will boost the immune response to vaccines and make it possible for us to maybe shorten the time between 2 doses or even eliminate the second dose. The goal, of course, the ideal would be to have a perfect vaccine that gives perfect protection with just 1 dose. But we may not have that with the first generation vaccines.
Okay, and ideally, how long will the vaccine effect be? If it's multiple doses, or that's something which will depend upon various vaccine candidates and obviously their platforms as well.
Absolutely, Vishal. This is something where we are completely uncertain about the duration of protection. As you know, vaccination can go from getting 1 shot of a vaccine that protects you for life to something like influenza, where we should be getting vaccines every year. And we hope that it will be more towards the first scenario rather than the second, but we don't know yet.
Okay. Let me bring in Urvashi here. Urvashi, on another aspect and a related one, going a step further, as Dr. Kang was earlier pointing out, as to lot will depend upon the scalability aspect of the vaccine candidate we develop. Once we know which vaccine candidate has successfully passed all the trials and is the right one, then we move on to the production part. But even with the production, really important is the distribution and the equitable distribution part there as well. That becomes really, really important. And we can't just obviously wait for the vaccine candidate. Preparations and planning has to be done now on that.
Yes, absolutely. So I think we've very much started, planning for those next stages as well. Of course, production, yes, will depend, to a great extent on what, sort of form the vaccine eventually takes, how many doses we need to give, how far apart. I mean, all of that will, of course, be determined at that point. But the preparations in terms of, what we need in terms of manufacturing capacity, those have definitely started, as well as on the distribution. And I think here is where we can, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Yes, there will be certain things which will be particular to this situation, but there is a lot we can learn from our past experiences, because I think a lot of people worry and wonder, how would we get the vaccine out to so many people? And given that, it's such a priority, we're in sort of a pandemic situation here right now. So I think, as I said, with something like a mission Indradhanush, for instance, which has now been recognized as sort of a global good practice in public health, we had very clear systems of engaging different departments within the government. As I said, it wasn't just the health department. You had Panchayati Raj involved, you had human resource development involved, you had defense and, transport, different departments were involved to get this vaccine to people. There was a huge element of community engagement. And I think we will need to focus on that, because there will be a lot of concerns, question marks around a new vaccine. It's a new disease. And the vaccine is going to be completely new as well for people. So there will naturally be question marks, concerns that we'll have to address. We'll have to use technology to keep track of, who is getting the doses, how many doses are they getting, and following up, in terms of any adverse reactions or any side effects that we don't expect in the trials, but we see them once the vaccine is out in the population.
Okay.
So I think those are the kinds of elements. And in fact, in Mission Indradhanush, what we had was that sort of every district had created a very tailored implementation plan to suit their context. So while we might not use, exactly all the same elements, I think we do have a good template from some of the programs that have worked well for us in the past. So we are trying to use lessons learned from all of them and see how we can put together, or at least start putting together, a sort of manufacturing and distribution plan as well, so that we are sort of ready to go as soon as we have the science part of it done and we do have something which is readily available.
Okay. Dr. Kang, your views on that, the distribution part and more so the equitable distribution?
So if we think about equitable distribution, the WHO has already developed what is called a fair allocation framework. This was published a couple of weeks ago, and it sets out prioritization depending on how much vaccine is going to be available. This is particularly relevant because India may receive some vaccine through what is called the COVAX facility, which is part of the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. The goal there is to have 2 billion doses of vaccine available by the end of 2021 for the world, and for the COVAX facility to provide sufficient vaccine for almost 20% of a country's population, which will be the highest risk groups.
Okay.
So I think that will work, but there's also Indian government efforts in the same vein.
Okay. Dr. Aparna, your views on this aspect before we bring this to an end, because your organization is involved with the development of a vaccine candidate there as well. So obviously the distribution part does come, but there must be some thought out there.
Yeah, as Dr. Kang rightly mentioned, that it has to be equitable and there needs to be a prioritization done, because the supply and the demand, there might be imbalance between the two. So when it comes to vaccination, we'll have to prioritize who we start with, the high-risk people, those who are at the most danger of either contracting the disease or having more of severe mortality and morbidity from it. So for that, we do plan to have community consultations to actually know how to prioritize, and definitely government does have a plan for prioritization.
Okay, so there it is. Obviously, equitable distribution will be the guiding factor there once the vaccine candidate is finalized from the ones which are being developed right now. Thank you so much out there, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, Dr. Aparna, as well as Urvashi, for sharing your views on this very important aspect in the battle against COVID-19, that is about the vaccine candidates being developed. We will come back again tomorrow with a different topic. Till then, you keep watching Rajya Sabha television, but please do not forget to wear the face mask whenever you step out of your houses. Thank you.